a space cat for a pet.
It's sort of
Thank
a
you.
space cat puppy.
They have cats and they have dogs.
Oh, are there just cat ones?
Yeah.
Oh.
For those of you just tuning in, we are live now for the Warframe cast. Michael, make sure and send me a friend invite or something in Warframe. So.
Oh, will do.
Because I'm casting it frequently on weeknights.
Nice.
So, yeah. Anywho, ladies and gentlemen, variations thereof, welcome to the Selectives Lorecast, a casual Elder Scrolls podcast. My name is Rotten Deadite, and with me today are...
My name's Corey. I have a lot of names, but I'm just using this one.
Okay. I'm Andrew, also known as the White Guar, and Sobek Ra elsewhere.
My name's Chris. I am known as Mojo. Yeah.
And I am James, also known as Aramithius.
I am Jonathan, known as Sothis on the interwebs.
My name is Michael, though you probably know me as Scourgicus or Moon Sugar Leader.
I'm Dylan, also known as Nexurus.
And I'm Luther, also known as Darcius.
And today we are talking about the Empire of the Empire. We're talking about Cyrodiil. We're talking about Imperials.
Yes.
Culture in general, and basically anything we didn't already cover in the Alessia cast, which I want to remind everybody today that we did do. So, you know, hold back on the Alessia lore. You know, don't throw the whole bucket at us. And I think we should just approach things the way we do, the way we did with the Nord cast, which is to start off with a history of Cyrodiil. Or the heartland of Tamriel, and talk about what was going on in Cyrodiil when the lands of Tamriel were first formed. So I guess that's immediately going to throw us into the big, you know, the big fan favorite to talk about with Cyrodiil, which is, hey, that place used to be a swamp. Well, a jungle. So can anybody talk about, can anybody start me off with a brief description of what Cyrodiil was like at the beginning of the Mythic era?
Full of beast folk and other jungle things, if I remember Topal the pilot rightly. He saw many various creatures like Khajiit and apparently orcs or something kind of get accounted as he was sailing through it. But I can't remember a whole lot else at that point. But
maybe some bird people.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Some bird people, which are rumored to have been actually the
Ayleids.
Ayleids.
Yeah.
A race of what they call Heartland elves. A race of mare. Also, did he mention the silver men?
The Kothringi.
The Kothringi? Yeah. Was that where we heard about the Kothringi, or was that
The
somewhere else?
Kothringi are originally from Blackmarsh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay. So Topal the pirate, of course, the pilot, Topal the pirate, that would be a twist. Topal the pilot being an Altmer, I think, who spent a lot of the Mythic era just exploring around, and the majority of what we know about the lands of Tamriel in the Mythic era were from his research and from his descriptions.
Actually, hearsay of his research and descriptions.
Exactly. Second or third party retellings of his descriptions. And so it's important to remember, as always, when we are talking about the events of Tamriel that are not covered directly in games, and even then, everything is subjective to the unreliable narrator rule. So, were there actually orcs in Cyrodiil? Maybe. Was there a race of birdmen? Could have been, you know, maybe. But so
well, see, I have a theory about this.
Please do. Please tell.
So
far away.
Basically, so I think this was a previous rant I had either on the podcast or on a forum somewhere. But basically, Torpal came out of the Somerset Isles and sailed along the coast to Tamriel, and he ended first in the Torpal Bay, named after him. So as he sailed up the Nibinian River, everything he saw, he said, "That's a man. That's a man. That's a man. That doesn't look like a mer. That's a man. That's a man too." And see, so we don't really, beyond saying, we saw birdmen, but were those birdmen or were those proto-Ayleids? We don't really know.
Or this might be a language issue, I would suggest, considering that the original Elvish words for mare, or describing races, were "they're like us" and "they're not like us." And so, hence the Aedra, our ancestors, and the Daedra, not our ancestors. So there is some logic behind the idea of Topal the pilot seeing something, calling it a man, but what actually happened was there's a translation issue, and what he was actually saying is not so much "that's a man," but "that's not an elf."
Yeah, although orcs are specifically called out in Topal the Pilot as well, which puts the timing of the Chimeri Exodus in an interesting state of flux if you go with that. But that's a tangent.
Yeah, because the orcs would have not existed before the Chimer migration. Yeah.
Yes, which it was technically later in the Merithic era, if you go by the strict timelines, if I remember rightly.
So once again, unreliable narrator.
Yep. Yeah, because Topal was pretty much our only source of about very, very early Cyrodiil.
As far as I can recall, he's probably I apologize. I said, as far as I can recall, he's probably our only source on pre-First Era history at all, if I recall correctly. I'm not assuming that stuff hasn't occurred in ESO, because I'm not very fluent in ESO lore yet.
There's some archaeological stuff. Oh, sorry, Jonathan. I think I cut you off.
I was just going to say there's some stuff. Also, I wanted to mention I don't really have any solid evidence of it, but I've always kind of felt like Topal's the Columbus of Elder Scrolls. Like, hey, I landed in India. No, we're American. No, you're Indians.
Right. Nah, you guys are Indians.
That's exactly the analogy when I think of him. I think it's Columbus, but maybe less brutal.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe less brutal.
Well, it depends on whether or not you're Khajiit, probably.
Yeah, indeed.
Remember, it was probably written from the Ayleid perspective, the Topal the Pilot story. So he's a hero. Who knows what he did?
So when did so let's see. So the Ayleids, as far as we can tell, lived in Cyrodiil for a period of time and built the White Gold Tower.
Indeed.
Yep.
At which point, or around that point, some men wandered in. A race of men wandered in.
Heresy.
Huh?
Men were always here.
Go on.
All right. My outburst is from, so there are a race of men known collectively as Mythics, even though they have no language and probably no blood lineage. They're not a singular culture, but this race of Mythics, I believe, were always on Tamriel. They never left.
Right. Okay. Although the alternative to that is that there was simply there's simply a much earlier migration from Atmora than everyone else, and the Nords were just the last and therefore the most Atmoran. But
whatever you say, Tyler.
Needs and Mords.
I feel like the out of Atmora I feel like the out of Atmora theory is just as crap as the out of Africa theory. So there's that.
Yeah, we have. I think it was Kurt Coleman that said that like it's the hoary old out of Atmora theory, which get the drum that gets beaten by the Imperial Geographic Society religiously. But in terms of actual in-game, I think the developers intend for it to be absolute rubbish. But we haven't had a lot of alternatives in-game given to us.
There's a pretty good fair amount of evidence for it too, but there's a fair amount of evidence against it. So
there's some ESO time traveling where you meet up with Needs in Morrowind, I think.
Oh,
yeah, in ESO or ESO, yeah.
Yeah, ESO, you time travel and hang out with some Chimer generals and fight off some Needs.
Interesting.
Were they? I seem to recall something about.
It was a
some conflict with. I seem to recall some kind of conflict with Alessians, where you're like, you go back in time as some general, and all the enemies are noted as being Alessian.
I believe so. Yeah.
Is that the same quest, or are those two different variations of like the same? Formula?
Man, it's been years. I don't remember.
I think that's two separate quests. The one where you go back and meet up with the Needs, I think takes place in Stone Falls, but I could be wrong.
I think it's in Daggerfall. The Daggerfall
one.
I might be thinking of a Daggerfall variant because you enter the body of some general or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, because you go back and it's the Battle of Glenumbra.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
then
cool.
that's the one I'm thinking of. With the Alessians.
There's also a Black Marsh quest where it suggests that the Knatten Flu is made by the Ayleids as revenge against the Alessian revolution, and like they specifically target. The interesting thing to me is they specifically target Kothringi as well.
Right, because you meet Kothringi.
Yeah,
and Black Marsh.
Mm-hmm.
Suggesting to me that Kothringi were part of the Alessian rebellion.
Yeah, that's. Sorry, just thoughts there that are kind of springing to mind from the Alessians. Though it strikes me that Cyrodiil wasn't particularly mannish, if I can use that word, until we.
Whoops.
Are we still going then?
That was weird. No, we're fine.
Okay, good stuff. But yeah, you have the Imge, you have Minotaurs, you have all these you have many different kinds of creatures hanging around in Cyrodiil, and then the Order comes along, says Mad is dominant, and everything disappears and gets driven to the fringes, which strikes me as kind of interesting because at that point you've got a species melting pot, and then you've got, it's in theory a cultural melting pot, or at least that's the kind of portrayal that the Empire likes to, that the Third Empire like to put on it.
There you go.
But it's just kind of getting more and more samey as time goes on, in my view, and right to the point where you can't tell the difference between Colovians and Nebaneans apparently, or at least not enough to make a difference to them in game.
Well, actually, that brings me to a point that I've been looking forward to raising on this, or question that I've been looking forward to bringing up, which is, what is the difference between Colovians and Nebanese?
Well, it's simply this. The Nebaneans, to be very, very basic, the Nebaneans are more Elven, and the Colovians are more Nordic.
Culturally or physically?
Culturally.
Yeah. If you're talking physically, the Colovians are closer, have slightly more in the way of Nordic blood. The Nibineans are closest you're going to get to true needs. in terms of those differences. But they kind of the differences in outlook are kind of interesting, and it kind of plays out in how Cyrodiilic religion goes. But I don't know if we wanted to open that particular can of worms at this point.
We're gonna have to bring up the 9 at some point. So.
Yeah. But I was going to say, if we want to talk more about the different types and different more cultural stuff before we get wrapped up in our in the religion stuff.
I wouldn't mind to expand upon my very basic fiction, if you will. So the size of Cyrodiil, as we know today, has shrunk and grown and shrunk and grown over time.
Mm-hmm.
And at least in the early Third Era, we know that, well, this division between East and West goes back as far as probably the Alessian Rebellion, but especially, but it goes especially to in the First Era. See, I never can remember if the Alessian Order or Raymond came first, and I'm pretty sure Raymond did.
Oh, Alessian came first, didn't
Alessian, something like that.
Yeah.
That's an order came first. Okay, so the East-West divide was solidified because of the Alessian Order, and at least so that's where you get. I just lost my train of thought. Sorry. That's where you get the East-West divide. It was because primarily the Alessian Order and their religious doctrine. So we know from certain, I think it's the PGEs and certain early writings, that the Colovians, sometimes called Cyronords, still had remnants of the Nordic pantheon mixed with what we would call the Imperial or Alessian pantheon. So, for instance, they would call Shazar Shor, they would call Kinnereth Kine, and things of that nature. They also venerated Shor more than they venerated Akatosh. At least it that's how I interpret it. Now, as of the time of Uriel II the Seventh, we literally see no differentiation. The Imperial 8/9 are dominant in all regions of Cyrodiil.
Yeah, I don't think there's any variation in that religion at all. Actually, by the time we get to the events of Oblivion.
No,
all the way across Cyrodiil, everybody's worshiping a pretty uniform culture.
Indeed.
Or pantheon, excuse me. Yeah. Except, of course, for the Temple of the One.
Well,
isn't the Temple of the One more like? Well, I mean, wait. Are you talking in terms of the Alessian Order?
No, I'm sorry. I was talking about Oblivion.
Religion.
Yeah. Okay.
Do we want to touch on the Temple of the One? What I think, or what we think it is?
Oh, I thought we were kind of all in agreement that it was basically a temple to Akatosh.
Yeah, that's basically what it is, and it's where the dragon fires
are lit and stay lit. Yeah.
Yeah. At least.
So since we're talking about religion, Cyrodilic religion, so there's this line in, I can't remember where it is, might have been in one of the PGEs, that talks about the 1,000 cults in the Imperial city.
Right.
PGE 1, the good old days.
The good old days. So what was up with them?
Well, see.
What all the different cults?
Yeah, I mean, what were they? Who were they to? What were they about? I've never really seen much that elucidates them.
I've got it pulled up here, and listed in the PGE 1. It mentions the cult of the Ancestor Moth, the cult of Heroes, the cult of Tiber Septim, and the cult of Emperor Zero, which was started by Tiber Septim.
Kulahane, yeah.
Yeah.
The cult of Zero? What's the cult of Zero?
That's
Emperor Zero.
that's for Kulikane.
Yeah,
For
it's,
Tiber Septim's
Tiber may
father
or may
figure.
not have assassinated.
For Tiber Septim's
Oh.
father figure.
Weird.
it's something Tiber Septim started because he felt bad.
Felt
basically.
bad, yeah, exactly.
Oh, Tiber Septim had
Yeah, so
more.
that's
Or conversely, because part of me has trouble feeling that Tiber Septim feels bad about anything.
Thank you.
Anything,
Yeah.
It's more so as a diversionary tactic, like, oh,
Mhm.
look, I'm venerating this person. How could I have killed him?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I love that dude.
That's
He's
it,
my best
exactly.
friend. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Where's
I
my
should
bro?
I should point out in PGE 1, it says specifically the Nibonese, with the Nibonese find the numerous and the numinous and everything around them, and their different cults are too numerous to mention. And
Yeah,
those
well,
four, yeah.
Mm.
So those four are the most famous of them.
yeah, I mean, that would make sense because the Nibonese were they worshiped god animals, very
Their
I don't know.
ancestors in the Moorish style.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know
Well,
how
there's-
close it'd be to the Marish style of it, because even the Marish style isn't the same across the board. But
True.
Anything that moves almost. But
Well, so combing through the PGE 1 a little more, I just hit Control F and typed in cults. It also mentions, I mean, I might be taking this out of context a little bit, but it mentions different blossoming animal cults, and the restrictions against certain kinds of meat eating, which
No
sounds,
cow allowed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You
So,
eat
I mean, that's
that's gonna get you whipped.
those are the only references I see to cults. But I'm gonna look up religion. There's the Alessian order, something about the 8 divines.
I think there's something in there about the god of minor inconveniences.
Greatest princes.
I'm not finding that one. That's a little inconvenient.
Just Control F for Knuckle.
That'll be in test 6, no doubt.
Yeah.
It's already in test 6. What are you talking about?
They're not in the alpha. Shh.
I keep hoping we'll convince Schick to put it into ESO because it would be perfect.
Yeah. The I think thankfully he's been spared that thread. I think what we ought to probably do is talk a little bit about the Alessian Rebellion and the Ayleids. Well, let's talk a little bit about because I'm trying to kind of do things somewhat chronologically, and I'm going to fail, but I'm going to try it anyway. What do we know about Ayleid culture?
It's extremely sadistic.
City states.
Well, it had been sadistic in parts.
There's the Barsabaic Ayleids.
Yeah.
And then there's who? All right, I might be fucking this up, but they weren't like the Daedra worshipping,
Adrophile.
And that we really only ever see in Oblivion. Well, not see, but read about. Like, I don't think it was until like Elder Scrolls Online that the Barsabaics were really more fleshed out.
Right.
So it's not necessarily all like sadistic, even though that's my favorite because it's just reeks of Sorcerers of Pantang.
Yeah, the flesh, the flesh magics. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's it called? The gardens they had the
flesh garden.
The flesh gardens. Yeah. Such a great idea. So wonderfully Drukari, And they like golden crystals and marble. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, although how much of that is simply propaganda? Because you got the Daedric Ayleids being bad and the Adric Ayleids being semi-good, at least until the Elysian Order come round. Because some of the Adric Elysians some of the Adric Ayleids helped Elysia out in her rebellion. I will get my A's straight at some point.
Yeah, there you go.
I feel like breaking it down to Daedric and Adric Ayleids is a little giving the Ayleids a little bit too much credit in their religious fervor. Like you see on the Daedric side, because that's really where we see the most interaction between Ayleids and some higher deity. Is it seems like they only ever ally themselves because they expect something out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not really a true veneration. It's just appeasement, so you
Well-
get what you want. Whereas really, what it seems like they most really venerate are just the elements themselves. Because I mean, that's always harped on it, you know. But instead of fire, is the only one is just pure like light. You know, hence their Varla stones and stuff like that, and their emphasis on Varlians. I think that is where their true religion, if you can even call it religious, I think it's a little more primal than an organized religion. But
well, here, so let me post a question to you guys. So this is a heresy I've had for a long time. So we associate light in the Ayleid religion with stars, and in human cultures on Earth, what do we use the stars for?
Navigation.
But not just navigation. What else?
Drawing their magic from.
No, on Earth they're to tell stories. Yeah. What do you call them? Constellations.
Yeah.
And what do we use constellations for?
Religions.
No. We use
fucking
them to mark
like psychic readings.
Astrology.
They're the third point in keeping time.
Okay.
I see what you're saying.
I mean, I guess like you could track the stars to for your year.
Yeah.
In a more abstract way, you could use them to predict the future. Like when a certain constellation is rising or falling or something like that, you can say that these things are more likely to happen and so on.
So Venus is in retrograde.
I'm going to go and say that. I'm just going to say this in the most unpoetic, I'm just going to assert it. Screw it. Okay, so the Ayleids made the dragon.
Heresy detected.
You're gonna have to break that one down for us.
Okay, so they are the first. They are the first culture to start keeping time.
Okay.
That's why they are so obsessed with stars and light and sorry.
I mean, it's keeping time in what regard?
Literal time.
Although
time.
Well, not like well, I mean, like
time.
break it down. Like, oh, it's 12:30 right now, or like, oh, it's the fucking summer solstice or something.
Yeah, or it's a year.
Yeah.
Of some sort.
Yes. Is so.
But that's just.
I mean,
that's cultural time.
I don't know. I find that a little hard to believe. Because I mean, it's just like the sun rises, the sun sets. It's from the get-go. If you have any kind of perception, conscious perception, you're gonna just track time. Be like, oh, it's morning. Oh, it's night. Oh, it's snowing out. Or
you live in the moment. I'm gonna suggest.
I could see it in more in terms of like
future and past and now.
Like
Let me.
Okay. Hold on. I actually have an idea, kind of where he's going with this. Maybe, or I'm translating it differently. Being able to track the stars also allows us to understand the structure of our universe.
Right.
So the Ayleids can use. So the Ayleids can use that. They can. They're maybe the first ones who noticed we're spinning. And all of this, step 1 stars, step 2, I don't know, step 3 white gold.
Yeah, it's not an accident that
Step 4 profit.
Starry Heart of the Universe or Starry Heart of Tamriel.
Well, let me put it to you this way. I'm going to make a suggestion based on a supposition that I do not fully understand yet. The measurement of time is the beginning of culture. I'm quoting Hodorowski here.
Yep.
What he says is, I paraphrased in another document that I'm working on, which is that a man standing in the desert forms a sundial. When the man notices the movement of his shadow, he begins to mark the movement of time. The observation of the movement of time is the beginning of culture.
No.
Well, let me explain where I think I'm going with this.
Okay.
Culture is a result of you could say an inevitable result of the human's potential to observe patterns, and to predict an uncertain future. So when a culture is formed when one person attempts to predict what another person will do and then attempts to manipulate that result.
Okay.
All right. Therefore, the observation of past events or the memory of past events and the hope for future events is the measurement of time. You see the connection there?
Well,
Yeah,
that's
an
not
attempt to
necessarily
control
culture,
time,
though.
maybe, which again would fit. Because if you control the patterns of how people interact, you control what will happen in the future, in theory.
Right.
Because if they can only interact in a certain way, then you know the result. If the only response to stimulus A is action B, if A then B, you predicted the future. It does that make sense?
Yeah, sort of. I think that's where I'm going with it. Like I said, I haven't fully explored this yet. So
yeah.
But
yeah, you could be on an Elder Scrolls level. You could almost. I was thinking Corey may actually be right now. I think about it, because at what point does Auriel start to get conflated with Akatosh? Or it's said ad nauseum by human scholars that Auriel is the elven Akatosh. I don't remember anything like him being associated with dragons at all during the stories of the Dawn era. He's something quite different, and it's only after that point and people talking about things after that point that the two get conflated. So
the Marokati. I mean, if and whether or not Auriel had any kind of draconic symbolism or anything, that doesn't necessarily mean that the essence of Akatosh wasn't there, and that by shedding the elven aspects and separating those out, because I mean we know that a dragon is a symbol of royalty, and so I mean that could play into it somehow. I'm not entirely sure how to reconcile that, but
if you didn't have draconic connections that are associated with Auriel during the time that the selectives are active anyway, you wouldn't need to pull them apart. You just say, look, Akatosh is a dragon, Auriel isn't. Job done. You wouldn't need to muck around with the tower. So the association with the dragon and Auriel happened before the selectives.
So I have a thought about Akatosh. So this, Nelson, this is something we can hash out later. But I was thinking about this idea of where does culture start, and I would argue that culture starts with naming, and when we begin to delineate and to define what things are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And to delineate and define past, present, and future is the first breaking of time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because prior to that, there's only now.
Oh, well, it's the first winding of time?
The first breaking of time. If we start talking about winding, we're going to end up talking about truth and sequence, and we're just going to.
Okay, I know. I get you where you're coming from, and on the grounds of like you're beginning to perceive both the past and the present and the future.
Right.
But you're perceiving them all at the same time, which is technically a break.
Yeah, and so whereas prior to the naming or delineation of time, there's just the eternal now, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
But when you start to break things up into, past, present, and future, whether you perceive them simultaneous or not, that's a whole other crazy metaphysical thing. But yeah.
And that's what breaks a dawn from the Mythic era.
Maybe. Yeah.
Because the dawn is the eternal now, and the Mythic is literally there is a past, present, and future.
Because at that point in the Mythic era, there are mortals who exist who are capable of perceiving them.
Yes. And I would say, disregarding the Khajiit,
I'm sorry, Johnny Anonymous just pointed out in chat, we might be on a bit of a non-Cyrodiil tangent here.
We might.
Okay, guys. So,
This is what happens when Lorebeards get together.
how about those Warhams?
Yeah, but this is a Warframe stream now.
That's the problem with Cyrodiil, though. So Cyrodiil is the arena within the arena, the stage in which all things end up at.
Mm-hmm. It's the reason why the Empire considers itself, why Imperials consider themselves to be people of multiple cultures and trade, is because they were the heartland, the center of Tamriel, and all business, one way or another, between places flowed through that. Much in part to the fact that Cyrodiil was interested in facilitating that.
Yeah, know? there's a saying. There's a quote from, I don't remember where it was, but it says there is but one city in Cyrodiil, and there is but one city in Tamriel, and that city is Cyrodiil City.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, and it's also the kind of just thinking about how the geography of Cyrodiil. It almost has a kind of an all roads lead to Rome feel about it anyway.
Yeah.
Because you've got all the rivers, and the geography is all pointing down into the Cyrodiil basin. And we have a dead cat on stream. This is good.
Sleeping.
But
oh my God, TOS
all the
violation.
various geographical things pointing towards the Niven River and towards the Niven River Valley, and so everything ultimately inclines and looks towards Cyrodiil. Again, all looks towards the center of Tamriel. So
yeah.
So yeah, of course, you're going to end up with a bit of everything, as everything flows downwards if you're taking water as that metaphor. But I don't know quite where I was going with that, but I'm blaming the cat.
To kind of build on what James was talking about. So the real trick here, the problem with talking about Cyrodiil is that Cyrodiil, oh boy. So the elves, if you want to go, or maybe the Aldmer, whatever, kind of came up with the basis of culture. And because, it talks about that, the Elven language and then their different sciences and such kind of formed the baseline. And then the Imperials came along and said, no. We're going to do this our way. And one of the things Corey and I were talking about, and we'll get to it eventually, is the idea that the Imperials redefine reality. And that they do this on a mythic level that, like, you just don't even see anywhere else. So all of this stuff ends up coming in, because we could spend hours talking about the Ayleids, but then the Imperials co-opt the Ayleids and make their stuff, the Ayleid stuff, into their own stuff. And this is what the Empire does. It redefines everything on its own terms. So everything ends up coming in and playing a part.
Isn't that what all empires do anyway?
No, it's not. So an empire is defined as a single cultural group having a asymmetric power over many other cultural groups. But the Cyrodiils don't necessarily do that. Don't necessarily. Because what they're doing is they're taking ideas and stuff. I mean, this happens in real life as well, but they're taking ideas and history and culture and concepts, and they're saying, no, that's us. That's us. They are the static, the static force against the chaos of the arena. Yes. That's why when an interregnum happens, Tamriel goes to shit. And all the 10 bloods, no matter what they believe or what they do, they're subconsciously racing to reestablish, to get that center heart beating again, because to do otherwise, the literal metaphysical forces of Tamriel break down when there is no central central force in this. I don't know how to explain it. There's no
that Cyrod is the thing that unifies everything.
Right.
It is the starry heart. It may not be the heart from the heart of the world necessarily. That's a whole other thing. We could talk about the Imperial diamond. We'll come to that. But it's that Tamriel or Cyrodiil unites all the things. I mean, think of the Three Banners War. All these races that should have nothing to do with each other. Argonians and Dunmer? Really? Are you kidding?
Well, no, Dunmer and Nords. I mean, really?
Dunmer and Nords?
Dunmer and Ords. Yeah, the Nords, yeah.
They
Here
define
we have these alliances.
Redguard and Orcs. You can make that argument for anything.
How does that?
Redguards, Bretons, and Orcs.
Yeah.
And these races that hate each other are all striving to try to put Cyrodiil back together again. Because when Cyrodiil breaks, everything breaks.
And I think that has a lot to do with the covenant that was made between Alessia and Akatosh
Yes.
slash Shazar slash Ariel slash insert another god.
But the chaos isn't necessarily Daedric. Is it just that? I'd argue that it's not necessarily the covenant, but the control of the White Gold Tower. Just to use the rough metaphor is the White Gold Tower Tamriel's steering wheel.
It is indeed. And what is if the White Gold Tower is the steering wheel, what is the covenant which is symbolized in the stone of the Kimmel out of Baal? What does that make that? That makes the person who holds that the pilot.
Right.
So
okay. And which also is a very, very good thing for Akatosh, but that's probably a subject for another day because the only people who can hold the amulet are the dragon-blooded or dragonborn, whatever you want to say for it.
Which means absolutely nothing in the scheme of things, because whether or not you're dragonborn is completely perceptionary, at least.
Seems that way.
How I interpret it.
Well,
because
what's it called? Elder Scrolls Online has a few thoughts on that too. So
yeah, that's kind of where I was going. The kind of thoughts of is it Varen who the prophet? I can't remember his proper name.
Yeah,
Spoilers.
Spoilers.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. The game's been out for a while, people.
Yeah. He finds the amulet and then is desperately trying to make himself dragon-blooded.
Which is where we learn that to become a dragonborn emperor is actually a matter of performing the ritual and not necessarily some blessing.
No, that's what
given.
That's what Minimarco claims.
Yeah, but it turns out to not be entirely accurate.
Although, if you really want to, I mean, I think Occam's razor kind of points this in the direction of, what we were just talking about. But you can make the argument, well, the prophet, what is his name? Vanis Galarian? No, that's the mage. Varen, whatever the fuck his last name is.
Hilarious.
Literally, Varen.
Even through the whole thing, his own perception of himself was he's not a dragonborn, and he's got to do this crazy ritual. And even it could have been a case of perception. I don't necessarily think that argument is worth throwing out, just because I kind of like the idea of it.
Yeah, I like the way that feels. Yeah, that it's a perceptive thing. Yeah.
I mean, my head tells me to lean the other way, but I still like it enough to not just throw it out the window wholesale.
You have to perceive yourself as an heir of Alessia.
Yeah, and it's not that far-fetched considering how much perception just in general affects the world.
And this problem with Varen Aquilarios was that he was a Colovian.
He was a man out of the West. I mean, he was the standard archetype of king.
The conqueror. But
the
problem was he thought of himself, one, as a Colovian more than an Alessian, and two, he was like a Hurricane. He was a conqueror, but he wasn't a hero.
That's a good distinction.
Also of Khulakane's actual bloodline as well, or is that just something I've heard somewhere?
Khulakane came after. So to say that.
Oh no, sorry. So I was talking Titus Mead.
Oh, Titus Mead. Titus Mead is some brigand who came off the road and said, "Fuck it, I'm emperor now." and because there was no amulet,
that's true. There was no amulet for him to wear. Yeah.
Because of Martin's new covenant, he came along and just said, "I'm king now." And people were like, "Well, we got this crazy bastard sitting on the throne, who we called the Gibbling, I think." But he managed to unite Cyrodiil out of the Storm Crown interregnum.
Gibbling.
So, gibbering.
Yeah.
Gibbering.
Which is
Jabroni.
kind of is another angle I kind of wanted to bring up about the kind of the progress of continuity as such that is in Cyrodiil. If you go throughout the whole history, right back from I don't know if it was about during the Roman era, but I imagine so. But because during ESO, there's an Elder Council, and everyone is fussing about what the Elder Council thinks about who's sitting on the throne, which is a really weird way to think about an era with lots of warlords running around. I mean, who cares what a bunch of people sitting in council think?
Especially when they've been proven completely ineffectual.
Well, see, the problem with the Elder Council is that the Elder Council, what it is, how it operates, how you get to be a counselor, changes depending on who's in power. So during the interregnum, the problem with the Elder Council was it effectively was only a governing body of the Imperial city at that time. It was a Nibinian-dominated what do we call it? City council with a grand name. It wasn't the Elder Council of old that had its tendrils spread out through all of Tamriel and brought it into one point where they could govern. So when Titus Mead decided to stop being an outlaw and realized that there was a need to unite Cyrodiil again, he brought the whole West. He remade the Elder Council to where it was more, what's the word?
Powerful? No.
Yeah.
It wasn't just
us.
Yeah, administrators.
Yeah.
It actually had legislative power.
Yeah.
Right. Executive power. Yeah.
Because
in some ways, anyway.
So, the way I see the Elder Council is it's a remnant of the Council of Skiffs, and the people who were at the Council of Skiffs were effectively the companions of Alessia.
Yeah.
And that is their purpose, to be the companions of the Emperor, counts, if you will.
Oh, council as in advisors, not council as in administrators.
Not council as advisors, not council as legislative branch.
Right.
Now, that being said, the Elder Council likes to, time and time again, try to be legislators because that is the natural way of things, to overthrow...
to seek power. Yeah.
To seek power.
This is a lot more detail than I think we get in game. But it makes so much sense that I can't really argue against it.
See, well, here's the problem with the Elder Council. It's in Arena and to a lesser extent in Daggerfall, it acts like what would be equivalent in the real world to the Congress of the United States.
Right.
Kinda.
Yeah.
And then in Daggerfall, in Arena, it does. In Daggerfall, it's just a body that's there, but it has history, but they might be counselors to Uriel Septim VII. And then in the third one, it's kind of the same. And the fourth, again, it's back to this Congress, but we don't know if they're elected or appointed or both.
Well, they've always been I've almost always been appointees, as far as I can remember. The only place where we get any kind of hint of how they get there is the is the brief history of the empire, which talks about the emperor appointing them and dismissing them at various points. And well, they can appoint and dismiss emperors as well at various times in Cyrodiilic history as well. So take from that what you will. It's all nice and incestuous, but I don't think there's ever been any elections anywhere, simply because of the way that imperial governance works in the provinces. They're supposed to be representative of the provinces and represent some sort of interests there, but beyond general law and order, I don't really see that they do anything in terms of provincial government and set tax rates.
Well, tax rates, but they also do something about the guidelines they give to the imperial trade, right?
Yeah.
So
that's what I mean about tariffs, etc.
So if you guys recall, during the Republican period of the Roman Empire, the Senate had a I don't remember what exactly it's called, but it's like literally a council of the tribes.
Yeah.
And these...
That is pretty much what it's called.
Yeah, and these tribal people would elect senators.
Yep.
Where did Nelson go? I was looking away from my screen and suddenly he's gone.
The Roman stuff is linked to the way that to the way that the US government works in some ways, apart from the fact that it's a unicameral, if that's how you pronounce it. It's been ages since I've said it. Yeah. But yeah, the Republican Senate is in some ways unicameral, but it's got your plebs and your patricians, but
and tribunes. And
the tribal stuff was based purely on there are 30 divisions of the empire, and you will be assigned one of these when you become a Roman citizen. And these senators were elected on the basis of those tribes.
So it just seems to me like the Elder Council, depending on the power of the emperor, changes its how should we say it's sovereignty. It's sovereignty from depending on who's emperor or not emperor.
Yeah. Basically,
I also read somewhere that people who are the richest always end up in there, which is not unsurprising.
Pretty much, so, it became convention from I can't remember precisely which emperor it was. I'll look it up. But he basically fired all the Elder Council and made them buy their positions back.
That was because
the imperial treasury was broke, and ever since then it's been inextricably tied to being rich, being powerful, and basically being able to claw your way into this political mess. And then just get as much power as you can away from the emperor in whatever kind of a tug of war as you can, which during the Septim dynasty was very, very linked to quite how closely the emperors could tie themselves back to Tiber. The instant that link starts to get broken, you start to see the Elder Council saying, "Well, we can appoint people, we can appoint emperors, we can
and you start seeing the Dark Brotherhood show up."
Sorry, say that again?
I said, and you start seeing the Dark Brotherhood show up.
Yeah. Well, they're a recurring theme throughout much of Tamriel's history.
Oh no! Don't rob the Morag Tong's fame too much.
Yeah, that's a good way to get stuck. So, Cyrodiil's interaction with other provinces has largely been either neutral to a fault or bloody as shit.
Indeed. Well, when you're the breadbasket of the world, you have that effect on people.
Yeah. Which means that you can kind of go down a list of all the other provinces in Tamriel and talk about all the shit that the Empire did to them. But I'm having a hard time thinking of anything that they did to elsewhere.
Well, so...
They broke the dragon inside it.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Well, they broke the dragon everywhere. But
specifically in Rimmon, Hall of the Colossus.
Yes.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Where,
and where were you when the dragon broke? When it's the Khajiit section,
they put Numidian.
They mentioned it broke Rimmon or whatever really bad when you activated, Big Walker or whatever the fuck they call it.
Yeah, but do you think that was done on purpose, or do you think that was because of the
activation or breaking the dragon?
Well, do you think that its effect on Rimmon was due to the fact that it was pointed directly at it, or do you think that had more to do with Rimmon than...
I think it just had more to do with that's just where they chose to reassemble and activate Numidium for the first time. It was just the test ground.
Which also
there's definitely something to think about, because Rimmon is a really weird place in Cyrodiil, because it's basically run by the descendants of Nimenes and Saesi, who were kicked out of Cyrodiil and took shelter in Rimmon and basically turned it into a slave state. It's not a nice place. So the fact that that's where...
Where are we finding this? Is this ESO somewhere? Or
finding what? Like...
Sorry, beyond Skyrim elsewhere. But anyway...
information on that.
Akaviri?
Right.
No, I would have to look it up.
Oh, okay.
If you're talking about the Akaviri settling
anything on Rimmon, I've tried, but this... Because what you were saying sounds perfectly in line with the whole notion of it's a backwater where there are disposable people who we can do this. We can build the super weapon.
And no one will miss it. It's the Bikini Isles.
You want to talk to Todd Damrath about that? He'll sort you right out. But anyway, no. Yeah. So that kind of there's a whole question there of why would they choose that and anyway they're interesting reasons why they chose Rimmon, but I'm just going to let that go.
We're also disregarding the first I'd say contact that the proto-Cyrodilics had with the Khajiit, and that was Pelennor going apeshit.
That's almost.
Oh yeah.
Remember, he sticks his head into elsewhere and then goes, "Nah, I don't want to fuck with that."
Well, he walks in and he starts murdering people, and then
somebody points out, "Hey, not elves."
Yeah, they look at him funny, and he says, "Okay, I'll interpret it that way," and walks away.
The thing that real quick sidebar. The thing that fascinates me is that it's Alkosh, the Khajiit interpretation of the time dragon, that beats him.
Yeah.
But what's in the center of Pelenel's chest but the Imperial
diamond, the diamond,
which is represent what? I don't understand.
It makes perfect sense. Daddy showed up and told him to cut it out.
Yeah.
That works for me.
Well, to put it if we're going back to the Akatosh cast, we have to remember that Akatosh is a schizophrenic. What was the worm eating at the roots of Yggdrasil that could bite, was chasing
the snake?
Midgard serpent.
Yeah,
the
Midgard
serpent.
Indeed. That was trying to eat his own tail all the time. Well, imagine a dragon with a bunch of different heads that don't agree on anything at all ever.
Nidhogg? That sounds like it, Johnny.
No, Yorkmonder was always biting his tail, and then once he releases it, isn't that when the start of Ragnarok is supposed to happen, and that's when he fights Thor?
I thought him fighting Thor was the start of Ragnarok.
Because don't the dragons bite the roots of Yggdrasil?
To be honest, I don't really know. Most of my because I'm thinking of this in the So what alchemically what a dragon means in the Aurora Borealis and in what the dragon has become in Elder Scrolls lore. So it's basically this thing that can't agree on anything at all, but somehow is managing to keep time flowing. Basically, at which head is most dominant at the time.
Yeah, and I think we've come to the conclusion that it's Nidhogg who gnaws at the roots.
Yeah, and
the world serpent's the thing that brings about
Jorgmander circles the world
Right.
and is biting his own tail, and once he lets go of his tail, then it's about to fucking go down.
Which is a symbolism for time, cyclical.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's the Ouroboros. Yeah.
But the problem with a many-headed dragon trying to bite one tail, or maybe multiple tails, or trying to find its own tail in a sea of tails. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, also, we're also, just in case anybody in chat, I'm looking at the names in chat, and I think everybody already figured this out, but the symbol for Elder Scrolls Online is a three-headed dragon eating itself.
Consuming itself, yeah.
Yeah, so it's an Ouroboros as well.
I mean, it's not strictly a dragon, because there's a lion and an eagle in there too. But I mean,
I think they're all scaled, though, right? Or did I?
Yeah. No. They're all scaled.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are.
What is a dragon but the combination of the three things that have been hunting humanity until we discovered gunpowder, basically?
A snake.
Speaking mythologically, maybe.
A lion.
Snakes, felines, and eagles.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
You combine them into one thing, and you get a very scary.
Yeah, you get the ultimate evil.
But just to finish up with what you were talking about, Nelson, was that the interactions with Cyrodiil with elsewhere may have been positive because, especially early on, before the Thracian plague, the Khajiit had a much more mercantile culture.
True.
And that would definitely work very well with Cyrod.
Do you think that mercantile culture is something that evolved in elsewhere? Never mind, don't answer that. We'll pick it up on the cast where we talk about elsewhere.
Good man.
I just looked over the cliff and saw the chasm of the answer that I was about to get. We should probably talk a little bit about the importance of White Gold Tower as the hub of the wheel that lies within the hub of Tamriel.
Sure.
And the question that I really want to ask here is, how could something that important be built by Ayleids and then they lose it to a bunch of monkeys?
Well, you assume that just because they built it doesn't mean they owned it.
Okay, you win. Fair enough. That's a very good point. Yes.
I mean, so the way I interpret this is that the White Gold Tower was built on this island in the middle of this lake, and it wasn't even a city yet. It was literally just the citadel around it. It was a religious okay, I'm at a loss for it's when you try to do something for an experiment almost. It's it's like a thought experiment, but they did it physically.
Well, I'll put it to you this way. I'll bring you closer to Buckney's area. And Johnny Anonymous, this is what we meant. Just because you built a thing doesn't mean you own it. As in, anything important enough to be a tower would not have been built by, I would hypothesize, would not have been built by cold-blooded analytical design. It would have been something built without, it would have been work free of the lust for result. It would have been something built or designed with a holy intention, or an artistic endeavor is what I'm trying to get at.
Indeed.
So, you hear sculptors talk about, how do you carve stuff out of stone? The answer is you figure out what the stone wants to be and then let it be that. Or they say, chip away all the parts of the stone that isn't what you want, and then at the end you'll have what you want. That's I think what we're applying, what I'm thinking is that applies to the White Gold Tower, and I would suggest to all towers in general. in the Elder Scrolls is that either they were produced by natural, or by which I mean supernatural phenomenon, or they were built by with an artistic intent, without a goal in mind, but just to build what needed to be built. It itself needed to be built. You know,
I don't know if there wasn't a goal though. I mean,
yeah,
the goal of towers is to emulate Ariel climbing the tower.
Yeah, but it doesn't.
And express an identity as well.
In a way,
Right.
the Numantia Intercept kind of disagrees with that in the sense that, well, because it breaks down the difference between the Ayleids and the Altmer in general, is where the Altmer and their tower sought to bind magic, keep elder magic bound, and sought to focus on Draco Chrysalis, which is, with Ariel, whereas the Ayleids, they wanted to harvest Castaway Creatia from Oblivion, and I would imagine use it, because why else would you want to harvest something? Yeah. And in which case, that's how White Gold Tower was built, in perfect resemblance of the wheel and the tower in general, which is why it gives it such a powerful control over the mythic nature of Tamriel.
And I assume also why we have Ayleid Wells built with a similar intention for harvesting stuff.
Right.
Right.
So
I would also disagree that the Ayleids didn't own it. The Ayleids absolutely owned it. If in Arbic Enigma 4, you see they're trying to take the remnants of their tower and change Greensap, and their power is will. So they want, and you see this in literally everything the Ayleids do. They want to exert their will over everything, and the idea of building white gold as the center of everything and emulates the wheel is they want to exert their will over the wheel and make it their own.
Right. To build on that, I'm looking at the Numantia Intercept, and at the very end it says that the Ayleids gave theirs, meaning their tower, a central spire as the imago of Adamantia, that is, that the tower looks like the Tower. The whole of the Polydox, that's the Imperial city, resembled the wheel, with 8 lesser towers forming a ring around their primus, that being gold. To dismiss this mythitecture as being a mockery of the Arbus is to ignore the important point. This same jest gave White Gold Tower a power over Creatia unlike any on this planet. It was a triumph of sympathetic mega fetish, there's a word to try to figure out, and the start of the threat to empire that brings me to this council. If the Ayleids made their own wheel within the wheel, whereweb ad semblio, what would happen if they plucked its strings?
Right.
So it's clear to me that the Ayleids were attempting a mythopoesis beyond anything that we had seen prior. And
a manipulation of the fabric of the structure of reality.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then that was taken over by man.
What I suppose I should rephrase what I stated before. I should say, just because you're the architect of something doesn't mean you own it.
They're not around anymore. It was stolen from them. Right. Man is the rebel of the Arbus.
Well, what? Yeah. Well, so here's the thing: when these Ayleids are fighting a civil war over what the tower should and should not be, which that again is speculation, and then men kind of go, "Hey, we're tired of being subservient to this. Why don't we go along through it as partners?" And one side says yes, one side says no. Is that theft?
Well, I mean,
the thief
it becomes so later.
I don't think it's necessarily as specific as the word theft. If they took the tower, whether you want to consider it a legitimate theft or righteous conquest, it would be. I would say it's just conquest, considering they just pillaged them. Especially with Pelennor on the field, just wholesale slaughter.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree with Mojo. It's a domination, is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it also explains the Schick description of why Cyrodiil became grasslands instead of jungle, is because the White Gold Tower was then owned, or if you want to use the word, influenced by a different entity. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're going to use I think just saying somebody owning the tower is a bit generous.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at least in terms of its mythic nature. I mean, yeah, if you have an empire and that's your middle of your empire, then I guess you could say you own it. But you know, real control over it requires, you know, a certain level of intent. And at least during the first era, that there was a lot more intent on the actual mythic use of the tower.
I might have to disagree with that simply because of jungles, which is going to open a whole can of worms, I know, but hear me out. You have the jungles. You have jungles during the Ayleid period. You then have forests during ESO, which is kind of weird. During the interregnum, there's kind of Cyrodiil is a mannish province at that point, but you've not got the central will to steer it. So I don't think there's that necessarily. You don't need that controlling will as such in order to influence things. With the White Gold Tower.
I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, well, one thing I will say though is, before the interregnum, there was still a large swath of time where mannish culture did control the tower.
Yeah, something like
the whole Alessian line, and then of course the Raymond line, which admittedly,
but we don't know either way there. So I was just avoiding it because I couldn't say.
Yeah, right.
Well, I'm curious to ask, when you guys played in Oblivion and you walked down to Black Marsh, what did that look like to you?
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah.
Or not Black Marsh, sorry, Blackwood.
Well, I mean, that's on the way anyways, but
kind of was jungly to me.
Yeah, and even I don't know. I don't think it's as specific as, oh, the border stops here, so that's where the influence stops. You know, I mean, that might be a little too nitpicky in terms of how, like, the tower might operate. Because I'm sure somebody with enough will and mythic power could even stretch it beyond that and affect all of Tamriel. It's just,
well, you see, I don't think that. So if we take that the transition of what we call jungle into temperate forest, if you will. I don't think that was intentional as much as it was just the way perception works in Elder Scrolls. It was I don't know how to explain it. I guess the White Gold Tower feeds on perception in a lot of ways. So if you
isn't it pretty widely agreed that the towers are just mythopoeia transponders? Like they just transmit the mythopoetics of the people.
Tonal tuning forks, yeah.
Yep.
So if it's about perception, then I mean it's going to echo the perception of the people who control it.
So getting back to what we were talking about earlier, if we were going to talk about the transition between this piece, I think it would have to have been when Raymond came to power, when this transition began, because he is the son of the land itself and a Nord. And how did the Nords perceive the land? Well, if they believe themselves coming out of Atmora, what is Atmora? But a temperate forest that got frozen over. So it's not so, getting kind of.
Yeah, that's not a connection that I made before. It's the idea of Atmora was a forest, therefore, when the descendants of the Atmorans control,
it became a forest.
Cyrodiil.
It became
That's
forest.
a very interesting idea.
Because that's what they're. That's what they're used to. Their perception of their self is irrestrictably connected to that kind of geography. So you have the Imperial, what we would call the Imperial Reserve today, come into being.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
because when part of perceiving yourself is, at least I think so, a large part of that is where's home, because a person that does not have a home is a person who probably has problems with themselves on a question of who am I kind of thing.
Yeah, can everybody spam the mms in the chat, please? Thank you.
Yeah, that was my thought, Irihileni, but I can possibly see where Curry is going with that. If I can just rephrase it, it's the idea of if you don't have a home, it's a lot of the way that we think about ourselves is focused on the idea of I am from a place.
Yeah.
I am connected to place and individuals around place. It's not saying that, and that sort of idea of you don't have a place that's yours anymore, that you have no necessary collection to, is probably going to do something to how you think about and process who you are. I don't believe that Corey is saying that if you're homeless, it's going to
let's not.
Let me phrase it this way: even nomads say, "I am from place."
Yeah.
Let me see what I can do with this. So, the idea of home and place is a metaphor of talking about identity. And keep in mind that identity in Elder Scrolls is based upon the Elnofey wearing ideology as skin.
Indeed.
Their ideology is who they are. That's their home. So that's really what we mean. And so I could spend 6 hours talking about this. I think I'll stop there.
Yeah, all right.
Do it. You know you want to.
Yeah.
So we've covered everything up to and including a little bit of Tiber Septim. I think didn't we do a Tiber Septim cast? I think we did.
We've done Talos.
We've done Talos. Okay, so we kind of skittered around it then.
Then we did the Enantiomorph in chunks, which I mean adds bits and pieces too.
So we hit the many-headed Talos and stuff.
Yeah. How about Riemann? I mean, I know we talked a little bit about the.
We didn't do a Riemann cast.
Nope.
I don't think we did, but we talked
Branson,
about...
what the fuck? You're supposed to get... How do you let stuff like this get past me?
Raymond definitely needs his own cast.
The Raymond comes
we did.
Yeah.
We did talk a lot about Riemann in the Space Lorecast, though.
Yeah, we did.
So.
Yeah.
Space Gods we got.
Okay, so
fires and moth ships and all that.
We'll have to do a Riemann Lorecast, and we'll just mark that as NSFW immediately, and then.
Raymond is the hope of man.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Riemann is the man.
And
yes.
Someone make some clam chowder.
And the man who is Cyrod as well. He's the personification of the land in a way that you've not seen in any other monarchs as well, or in any other emperors. There's the idea of Raman as the righteous ruler, if you like, doesn't come across anywhere else in quite the same way.
Well, he was supposedly the myth is that he was born literally of Cyrodiil. Yeah.
Yep.
Say that again, Nelson.
The myth is that he was literally born from the earth of Cyrodiil.
Yeah, exactly. And the reality being he possibly ran away with a shepherdess, if I remember MK's notes correctly. But so depending on which way you want to read that, and whether that actually happened or not, I don't know. it feels cooler for me for it to have actually happened rather than him
Yeah.
just trying to myth his way into legitimacy.
Well, it also I like the idea of Riemann having offspring that are illegitimate.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can't blow your wad over a battlefield and not accidentally impregnate somebody. That's just.
Raymond, no. Why do you do this?
That's a horrible image. No, that's not.
I mean, you jerk off without using your hands, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
No chafing.
It's like a crowd suppression system.
That's exactly right. Big foam, big bursts of foam. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Don't look in the sales foam.
Yeah. So, all right. We'll think about a Riemann cast. Whether you want one or not.
How about we discuss? I mean, I don't know if this is too grandiose a topic to get into, but Akaviri influence on the Empire.
Due to the number of Tsesi, what was their title? What was his title?
Potentate?
The Potentate, yeah.
Potentate, yeah.
Potentate, whatever.
An emperor without being an emperor.
Yeah, basically.
Basically.
Mm-hmm. Potentate.
And with lives longer than most emperors, if I remember my timelines correctly. He was something like 200. Yeah, he was over 200 by the time he was assassinated.
Yeah.
Well, that happens when you're an immortal vampire snake.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
You do live a bit. Yeah. French snake samurais, yes.
But can we see Tsesi influence anywhere else? I mean, if I remember rightly, the
blades.
Akaviri, yeah, the blades, obviously. But you've got Akaviri surnames being a big thing among the Nibonese nobility, if I remember correctly. It's a point of pride if you can link yourself to Akaviri in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But does it kind of leak out into anywhere else apart from samurai armor and stuff?
Well,
it's never been greatly represented in game.
Well,
So
we don't really have a whole lot of very specific examples about Akaviri culture, so it could be that we've been seeing tons of it, but because we don't know that it's Akaviri culture, we'll never know that it was inherited from them.
The trick with Sayesi culture is that almost everything that we have on it was written hundreds of years later, usually by Imperials.
Yeah.
There's one book, Rise and Fall of the Blades, I think, where it allegedly quotes what the Sayesi said when they knelt to Raymond. But again, that's the words of an historian, and we don't have, I don't think, anything written by the Sayesi themselves.
We do.
There was a journal.
Yeah, the journal.
I think that's the only thing.
Yeah, in Oblivion, you
encounter.
Isn't there even a ghost of an Akaviri?
Yeah, isn't there?
There is, but he's very man-looking.
Right.
And I mean, we could chalk that up to engine limitations or
it didn't have the money,
or them just being
not
culture-eating vampires.
Yeah,
they ate it to become it. Yes.
Well, especially how. Whichever fucking Akaviri potentate it was that eventually became Chevalier Renaud.
Yeah.
I mean, and all of it. I mean, it merits mentioning, at least from my interpretation, that everything we know about the Sayesi is at least how Anu perceives it, how the Godhead perceives it. So we can talk about Akaviri culture all day long, but based on what we see in the games, what we see is really only what the Godhead, the dreamer, ascertains from those things rather than
the Akaviri had no culture. That's why they ate it to have one.
Well, see, and that's why I bring that up, because the Akaviri themselves, as Jubal may see them, is probably a lot different than how Anu perceives them as Godhead. So if we're talking about the Akaviri in an actual objective sense, we have no idea what their culture is. I mean, we can We get so many metaphors about a vampiric snake people, but that could just as easily be a metaphor that the dreamer uses to describe them because they're so foreign to him. He doesn't know what to do with the information he's presented with, so he metaphorizes them to make them sort of make sense.
I like to think that
that sounded really smart.
I like to think that the Cyrodiilic people have like a hugely mixed bloodline where they're like have a little bit of Akaviri in them and a little bit of Minotaur in them and a little bit of Dragon in them and a little bit of Ayleid in them and just a whole bunch of different stuff.
They're mongrel blooded in a way that the Bretons imagine themselves to be.
I will fight you.
Sick burn.
Oh my God! And I thought I was going to be the first one to burn on the Bretons today.
Listen, Michael, you can fight me, but you'll lose.
I'll get Alkosh to come in and whoop you.
A monolith needs a good foundation of many points in order to stand tall for as long as it has.
That's a lovely way of putting it, because there's a realization of yes, Cyrodiil is a mongrel culture, but it's a mongrel culture of everything Mannish. Even Sacy, if you want to potentially say
not just Mannish. Not just Mannish.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they
Minotaurs, etc.
Yeah.
More on us.
So and Inga and all the rest of it. Yeah. We haven't gone near the select yet, but
the very language they speak has their foundation in Ayleid. So how you think and how you perceive things is very sorry, I'm trying to say this in a way that I don't think is wrong. What language you speak can fundamentally affect how you perceive things and how you even think things.
Yes.
So
Oh yeah,
we could take
language shapes the thoughts.
Yeah, language shapes your thoughts. So we could take I guess we could just use English. So English is the bastard language of the world.
Yep.
And there's a reason why so many people speak it, because it adopts so many things. I mean, it's a Germanic language with now a romantic syntax.
Yeah, but like there's a lot of different cultures out there or languages out there that have different words for different things.
Yeah, but not on the scale of English.
No.
Japanese.
I wouldn't agree with that. English is the most fucked when it comes to conjugation, though.
It depends on what kind of culture or ecosystem you're looking at, because language is shaped by not only like the people but also the ecosystem that they're in. For instance, you might have a culture that experiences a lot of rainfall, and they're going to have several different words for different types of rain or different types of mud. Instead of us, where we've got like a few words for different types of rain, typhoon, and some of them are stolen from other cultures. So, but English is a mongrel language.
Oh, English is the mongrel language, I think. Well, right now.
Well, yeah, right now. But who knows? Back in like the Roman times, the Romans might have stolen.
Oh, in the Roman times, there were no English as we know it wasn't a thing.
It was Germanic, I think.
That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that there were other Mongol languages in the past.
Outside.
Well, I mean, yeah. Yes, but it's not the only one. Like, I see what you're saying. It's not the only one, though. Japanese also is very mongrel-like. They have an entire syllabary dedicated to writing it in words that are not Japanese.
Yeah. But they didn't become mongrel-like until probably in the 1950s. Yeah.
Once the Dutch started.
Well, have you guys...
Dutch, the Dutch.
So
if I'm understanding Corey correctly, he was suggesting that modern Cyrodiilic is based on Ayleid language, and so the Imperials have adopted at least some degree of an Ayleidic
worldview
perception of the universe. Yeah, which would also make sense why they claimed White Gold Tower.
And it's also what they did with their gods.
Thank you, because I want to talk about that.
Let's do it.
Yeah, that struck me as a segue into something we really do need to talk about.
Let's talk about the Cyrodiilic religious structure as it was. Well, let's do it in chronological order,
please.
So at the time of the Alessian rebellion, friends, in an hour and 34 minutes.
Jesus.
And we're just getting to the religion here. In terms of at the time of the Alessian rebellion, can anybody talk with some authority about what the religious system looked like back then?
It was kind of imposed. It was imposed on them, is the impression I get. Just again, my sole text here is Shazar and the Divines. So if there's anything else, shout. But the way that the needs that had just been liberated were still thinking, they were still thinking in terms of the Ayleid pantheon, so to speak. They were still chasing Mirish deities. Akatosh specifically gets in that book gets called out as being a Mirish thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can assume that, particularly given that the Ayleids get associated with the name 8, with the number 8 a lot in other sources, particularly the way they sliced up Pelennor, that the rest of the 8 have those associations to a degree, or the Cyrodilic flavors of them will have an Ayleid base. I'm assuming that later on after in the 8 Divines period, that someone like Mara, who has exactly the same name across Nordic and Cyrodiilic pantheons, that they will you'll kind of get regional variations under the same umbrella and that sort of thing. But as it existed, as it existed at Alicia's time, it was a very Adric Ayleid thing. And I've got some thoughts on potentially how it evolved, but that's using third era text, so I don't want to bring that into this at that point. But yeah, that's my spiel.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So basically, how I understand it goes like this. So Alessia, being the very powerful and influential diplomat that she is, called a council. I would probably call it the first. This is before the taking of the Citadel, and I think we know it as the Council of Skiffs. So she calls all her allies to her: the Nords, the Ayleids, and the freed slaves. So the Nords say, "Hey, listen, if we're gonna make," so she goes, "Listen, we got to make a worldview, a bunch of gods, right?
We got to get our shit together."
Yeah. So the Nords say, "Listen, if you don't worship our ancestors, we'll leave." And the Ayleids said, "Well, if you don't worship our ancestors, we'll leave." And the slaves go, "Well, we don't know who our ancestors are." So Alessia finds a way to satisfy the Ayleids and the Nords, and probably to a lesser extent the slaves, to say, okay, these are the gods we're going to worship. These are going to be the preeminent gods. So we can kind of divide these into, I guess 3 and 3 and 2.
A couple extra.
So you have the three living gods of the Nords, which are the 3 feminine gods, and then we have the 3.
Mara's Mary also.
Well, she's a universal god, but
I'm just saying they're not all Nord.
No, but the hearth gods are central to Nordic, their worldview, and I don't think they would agree on anything without having them included, at least. I think.
I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
So we
And
have 3 living gods, and then 3.
so then we have 3 gods that we don't really understand very much. We have Zenithar, Stendar, and Arche. And and it feels like to me they're kind of all sliced off from Trinimac and his mirror brother Pelennor. And then we have the outlier god that kind of tags along even though no one wants him to, which is Julianos.
God, fucking Julianos again.
And then we have the head god, which the Nords and the Ayleids have 2 different head gods, which one is a dead god, which is Shor, the other is a ascended or gone god named Ariel. And so the
the head of the Ayleids. Who was the head of the Ayleids? Wasn't it?
it appears to be Ariel based on
Ariel.
I thought it was Meridia.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's for a certain
Sect.
a certain,
a
a certain sect that may have been bigger or larger or smaller than we might imagine. But looking at,
I mean, they just so happen to be chilling in White Gold Tower. So it makes them seem like they're
more important.
The pinnacle of what you should think of Ayleid society.
But based on, anyway, in Oblivion.
Location, am I right?
Yeah.
Based on Oblivion, based on Ayleid ruins, we see all kinds of iconography of eagles and elves like eagles. I don't know how to explain it. Basically, Ariel things. At least that's how I interpret it. And she combined those into Akatosh.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you get the 8.
So,
but then they took the Citadel, and the Nords went away, so Akatosh became more Arielish until the Alessian Order came around, and
until the Marakati Selectives,
indeed,
did their little, boogie.
Which is why you always have the 9th god and Cyrodilic in Cyrodiilic society. So the 9th god is always changing. So the first 9th god is Shazar. The second 9th god is Raymond. And the third 9th god is Talos. And
Raymond doesn't ever get totally displaced though, does he? Because
none of them ever
back
do.
to the list in...
None of them ever do.
Sorry?
I said none of them ever do. But
yeah, because they're still listed in the almanac of gods that is Varieties of Faith.
I mean, Shazar absolutely does. I mean, Shazar is the missing god, so he straight up gets displaced. But,
yeah, but he's always.
I mean, even to the point where he's not even worshipped for whole swaths of time. People probably even hear the name and are like, "What? Who the fuck's that?"
Maybe it's that the 9th god is like a light shining through different prisms.
Well, yeah,
or shining through a prism. At one point, the 9th god is Shazar, another it's Raymond, another it's Talos.
Yeah, and even with Raymond, I mean, I know he's been worshipped as like a cultural god hero type thing, but was it ever on the scale of one of the divines?
I don't think
absolutely.
so.
I think so.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, I've always ever seen in regards to any potential divinity that he has that it's always been kind of small time, grassroots movement in certain areas, but never so widespread as become part of like the actual theology of the divines.
He is literally
such a way that Talos is.
Yeah, but he's literally styled the light of man, the god of the world.
Well, sure, but so are the Tribunal and Morrowind. That they're even on a much more. Well, I mean,
they're not gods of the world; they're gods of the Velothi.
Well,
and Raymond could be called a god of the Imperials.
Cyrodiil. I mean,
that's not that
Raymond
bad.
couldn't even conquer all of Tamriel.
Yeah, I think probably one of the things.
Nobody conquered my heart.
Particularly Cyrodiil. Raymond Cyrodiil didn't conquer much of anywhere, if I remember rightly.
He united.
This is-
He united Cyrodiil. That's what.
Yeah.
That's why he's.
Yeah.
True.
This is why we need Todd here, but maybe it's the idea that Raymond failed. That Raymond was supposed to be the light of man, and
Ooh.
wasn't.
Well, yeah, I
Well,
absolutely
that-
agree. I think the whole light of man thing has always been like hardcore propaganda, when in reality, Raymond was a fucking weirdo, sadistic, fucking, I don't know, crazy pants McGee, dude. Like,
Yeah, he was nuts.
But
he
he-
fucking bites jaws off and then fucking ejaculates and then
Who taught him
turns
that?
his blood
Who
into
taught him
brandy. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, the dude just wasn't.
He did rule an empire across the stars, though.
hmm I'm not saying he didn't have some good ideas, but I am saying that he was nuts. And
Yeah,
in my
yeah,
opinion,
legit.
if you take any of this stuff to be, if you take any of Riemann, I can't believe we're talking about. Might as well fucking do a Riemann. If you take any of what people say in legend about Riemann as being actual fact, which is probably a mistake.
Right.
He's still the guy was exactly. The guy was born from the ground of Cyrodiil itself. You don't have a parent like that and not be, completely off your rocker,
Well, yeah, that, and you have Akatosh's red diamond stuck into your brain, and
Yeah.
you wonder why he's off his rocker.
Didn't I read something about the kings of Cyrodiil can hear the memories of previous kings in the diamond?
Yes.
Yes.
That comes
Yeah.
up in Where Were You When the Dragon Broke?
Okay, so
Because-
imagine that, but you're Riemann Cyrodiil and you don't have a choice.
Oh God.
Yeah,
Well,
there's
It's
a
oh
reason.
god, oh my
Crazy.
god, he's an abomination. He's
yes,
Yes, he
Hestra.
is.
Fuck.
Oh, from Dune.
from
Yeah.
Dune,
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
he is the
Wow.
God Emperor
yeah.
of Cyrodiil.
Just hasn't got the lifespan for it.
There is now definitely going to be a Raymond Lorecast.
Oh
Yes.
no!
Yes, there has to be.
What's
He
his
had-
golden path, Chris? What's his golden
It's golden, but it's a golden shower.
I was gonna say it's like a pink tunnel.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a heresy.
It's a golden love canal.
Okay, so Corey and I the other night had this long conversation about Cyrodilic culture, and I was thinking about afterwards. I was thinking about religion, because that's what I do, and it struck me that Alessia's move, kind of like a chess move, right, to kind of unify everybody was to unify the gods.
Mhm.
And I feel like this becomes the pattern for Cyrodiil. And whether you want to say it's the unification of cultures, like literally sometimes like with races, Minotaurs, Needs, Nords, whatever, they all become one thing. And then on and on. And it almost, we had talked about this idea that in the Cyrodilic pantheon, there are things that don't really make sense. Like nowadays, you read most of the modern stuff and Dibella's just kind of like, either the goddess of artists or good times.
Whatever.
Well, that's sanguine, man. That is sanguine. That's his sphere.
She's an Aedra, so she's the good one.
Right. But what's the difference between Aedra and Daedra other than a word?
That's the point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah. It's an interpretational matrix. And so they've incorporated elements of Aedra and Daedra to try to bring things, I would argue, into a singularity.
Mm.
And so it makes sense that the Temple of the One would be an imperial thing, and it would be in the imperial city.
Although,
Well, that's actually. I hate to interrupt, but that's actually the idea of unification of religions is very interesting, considering the fact that Riemann established in the late years of his life established a nationwide policy of Daedra worship.
Yes.
Which I don't think too many people know about yet.
Oh, I didn't know about that. But
where's that? Again, where's that from?
It's from a conversation I had with Kirkbride in New Orleans.
Okay.
I don't think he's written anything that uses that yet.
Right.
So
But
part of the. Go
I
ahead, sorry.
hypothesized at one point or another that the timeline of Cyrodiil, of Tamriel in general, involves 4 seasons.
Yes.
Except there's actually a 5th. And Rieman's rule over Tamriel, over Cyrodiil, happened during what I like to call the midlife crisis stage.
Okay.
Which is the end of spring moving into fall.
Yes.
Anyway, so the idea of Riemann following in a movement in Tamriel in Cyrodiil of attempting unification fits with the idea of Daedra worship.
And
Okay.
where I wanted to go with this to be even more controversial and more heretical is that I think we've all pretty much agreed that man is the rebel and that the elves are a king. And that goes back to the Wandering Elnafey and the Old Elnafey, etc., etc. What seems to be the plan among men is unification. The Imperials move towards a singularity. The needs interbred with the elves to the point that they became a new race, the Bretons, which I argue is the next subgradient. And it seems that all the variations of man, except possibly the Nords, that's a whole other discussion, are moving towards some kind of singularity as an answer to whatever they perceive to be the problem of Tamriel or the Arbus, depending on how you want to talk about it.
Okay, so each race of man is an answer to the question of Tamriel.
Yeah, and they're trying to solve it in different ways.
Yeah.
The Bretons say we all have to get along. And so they or the needs say we need to get needs and elves, the Durrani specifically, say we need to get along, and they form a new race of elven men or mannish elves.
Yeah.
Whereas the Imperials are, I don't even quite know how to put this in, and Corey helped me out here if I'm misspeaking. But they almost seem to be creating, almost moving towards like a mannish Aldmeris, and that's what Cyrodiil is.
A new home.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
So to go on with this theory, the problem is that there's already a mannish Aldmeris kind of. It's called Altmora.
Yeah.
And that's
right,
where
we talked about that.
That's where the Nords come from. But there's also the 4th way, and that's the way the Ucodans, which is smite all the infidels. Like, they ain't having that shit.
Yep.
That would be their answer, yes.
Which is why if Martin isn't the fourth ninth god, a Ucodan Westerner is going to come out of Hammerfall and unite the Empire of Man again, and that's when the 5th era is going to get real cray.
That's glorious.
And
That'd be a lovely idea. Yeah.
So when we were talking about who's the next regal line, if you will, I said, yeah, it's going to be the blood of Ucoda that will sit on the throne, and it's gonna get bloody, to say the least.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think we were talking, well, I guess I was pontificating to you actually, because I was going on a rant, was when we were talking that Akatosh wasn't the only god that was an agreement between the Nords, the 3. All the gods were, and the 8. That they were hybridizations. So, for instance, Dibella is one of my favorite divines, and one of the reasons why is so Saint goes back to Raymond. Is when Raymond's fucking around so much, the Sanguine walks in and he goes, "Holy shit! My sphere's hedonistic, but this is a whole new thing." And I just see when he's noping out. When he's noping out, all I see is Raymond and Dibella doing some weird shit in the background, because Dibella, Sanguine walks in, Dibella looks at him and goes, "No, you're in my sphere now."
So that's something that confused me. Why didn't they, if they wanted to unite all the gods, why do they have a triune of gods of the females? Why is the triune goddess separated into the three?
The maid,
mother-
the maiden, the mother, and the crone.
Yeah.
It's classical.
Yeah, I
It's-
guess so.
And I would argue that I don't think we'll ever see it in the games, but theologically it would make sense that they're all moving towards one god. That there's going to be a they're going to be
that's what
monotheism.
That's what the Alessian order attempted to do.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what they.
Okay.
And then
So
my argue is that they'll try it again.
And that's one kind of difference that I wanted to bring up about
that's
Cyrodiilic
Amaranth.
religion in terms of how it's processed. That there's reflections on cult worship. Is the book I'm thinking of, but the way that pitches the Cyrodiilic pantheon is barely as a pantheon at all. It's just a collection of single god cults that happen to be the most popular. It's like it's not the 8 of the Song of Ice and Fire, where you've got the 8-faceted one. It's Chaos Undivided, where you've got 4 very, very loosely tied things together. To bring this back to what we were talking about before the cast into 40k, it's the kind of collusion of those sorts of things where you have these very, very individualistic single god worshipping cults that come together. That's the way that text pitches it. I don't know, and the way that you don't have temples to the divines. You have temples to Dibella, you have temples to Akatosh, you have temples to Arche. They're all singular, and so you've not got the same evolution towards the one yet, at least. I don't know whether that's the end point. It would be an interesting idea if it was, but I don't think it's quite as unified a thing as it's perhaps made out to be. But that's my own interpretation.
That's fair. It wasn't as a unified thing. So this kind of it's hard to get a inside of the game. It's kind of hard to get a chronology of this, but outside the game it is. So and Morrowind, you have the Imperial cult, which is the unification of all these cults into a single Catholic Orthodox cult, if you will. Now,
that makes sense.
And I believe this began. So, for instance, the Dibella that we see in, say, Elder Scrolls 3 and Elder Scrolls 4 is not the hedonistic, holy shit, Sanguine's noping out at what she's doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Alessian orders, because remember, the reason why Muruk sees Alessia, or is, I guess, in the desert punishing himself, is because he screwed around with a female, right? So this very chaste Puritan Dibella that we see is a result, kind of that.
Okay.
Cool.
You know,
I think we've shown that some of the best lore in the game is Imperial lore. There's some
very good,
really good stuff going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, the problem that actually one of the problems with Elder Scrolls is that we have a very Imperial tilted, Patamaic tilted lore. We don't really have the other side.
Yeah, not yet.
That is as convincing as Imperial and Patamaic.
Cough, truth and sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Cough.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the truth and sequence gave it a shot, and it was pretty good. Yeah,
it was pretty great.
Yeah, but it's not the 36 lessons.
And that's my problem with it. It's very good, but it still doesn't have the same depth as the 36 lessons does, and that's too bad.
37 lessons.
I'm sorry. Well, the increasingly inaccurately named 36 Lessons of Vivek.
36 and 1.
I'm trying to think of is it Zoroastrism? I think it's pronounced, or something like it was Freddie Mercury's religion.
Zoroastrian.
Okay, which is one of the few religions that, one of the few modern religions that still upholds a very strict viewpoint on good versus evil.
Oh, yes.
And I would recommend people get wiki lost on that stuff, because it's very good if you're trying to come up with a very black and white, highly organized religious system that has very little room for that in theory, but maybe not in practice, has very little room for
A gray maybe.
A gray maybe, yeah.
Ooh.
And actually, I think at that point we should probably call it, because we have been going for exactly 2 hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dear God.
Well,
so,
see,
we haven't figured out what we're going to do again for the next cast, but it'll be good.
Cyrodiil Part 2?
Red Guard. Let's do Red Guard.
I got no problem doing Cyrodiil Part 2. I got no problem doing Regatta. Either one are fine.
Okay.
But I want to thank everybody who followed today. Roman numeral 2, Justin, Kisei, and Rhodium Odie. Thank you very much for following, and welcome to the House of We. I'm sorry I didn't get to you when you came in. Everybody else, thanks very much for showing up. Wave goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody. Khajiit love.
Love you.
Have a good night.
Bye.